The body of light, sometimes called the astral body or subtle body, is a quasi-material aspect of the human body, being neither physical nor solely spiritual. Posited by a number of philosophers and elaborated on according to various esoteric, occult, and mystical teachings. Other terms used for this body include body of glory, spirit body, luciform body, agiodius, radiant body, asteroideus, starry or sidereal body, and celestial body. Pretty sure I pronounced a couple of those wrong. The concept deviates from the philosophy of Plato. The word astral means of the stars. Thus, the astral plane consists of the seven heavens of the classical planets. The idea is rooted in common worldwide religious accounts of the afterlife, in which the soul's journey or ascent is described in terms as ecstatic, mystical, or out-of-body experience, wherein the spiritual traveler leaves the physical body and travels in their body of light into higher realms. To pause there, that is really, for your average mundane person, that's the only connection they really have consciously to their body of light, to their invisible self, is if they have a near-death experience or an afterlife experience or an out-of-body experience. That it's only when the two are separated that most people have an acknowledgement that the invisible self even exists at all. Neoplatonists elaborated on Plato's description of the starry nature of the human psyche. Throughout the Renaissance, philosophers and alchemists, healers, including Paracelsus and his students, and natural scientists such as John Dee, continued to discuss the nature of the astral world, intermediate between earth and the divine. The concept of the astral body, or the body of light, was adopted in the 19th century ceremonial magician Eliphas Levi, Florence Farr, and the magicians of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, including Aleister Crowley. So, on that, let me turn to Crowley himself. This is from Crowley's I don't have the title in front of me, so I'm trying to remember the name of this book. Magic in Theory and Practice. Magic in Theory and Practice, Chapter 8 of Clairvoyance and the Body of Light, its powers and its development, also concerning divination. Crowley writes, within the human body is another body of approximately the same size and shape, but made to a subtler and less illusory material. It is, of course, not real, but then no more is the other body. So that's interesting. So he's saying that within the human body, there's another body about the same size and shape. It's made of a subtle and less illusory material. It's, of course, not real, but neither is your physical body. Before treating of clairvoyance, one must discuss briefly this question of reality, for misapprehension on the subject has given rise to endless trouble. There is the story of the American on the train who saw another American carrying a basket of unusual shape. His curiosity mastered him, and he leaned across, saying, "Say, stranger, what you got in that bag?" The other, lantern-jawed and taciturn, replied, "Mongoose." The first man was rather baffled, as he had never heard of a mongoose. After a pause, he pursued, at the risk of a rebuff, "But say, what is a mongoose?" "Mongoose eats snakes," replied the other. This was another poser, but he pursued, "What in hell do you want a mongoose for?" "Well, you see," said the second man in a confident whisper, "my brother sees snakes." The first man was more puzzled than ever, but after a long think, he continued rather pathetically, "But say, them ain't real snakes." "Sure," said the man with the basket, "but this mongoose ain't real either." So this is a perfect parable of magic. There's no such thing as truth in the perceptible universe. Every idea, when analyzed, is found to contain a contradiction. It is quite useless, except as a temporary expedient, to set up one class of ideas against another as being more real. The advance of man towards God is not necessarily an advance towards truth. Isn't that interesting? Wait a minute. I'm going to read that again. The advance of man towards God is not necessarily an advance towards truth. All philosophical systems have crumbled, but each class of ideas possesses true relations within itself. It is possible with Berkeley to deny the existence of water and food, or water and wood, but for all that, wood floats on water. The magician becomes identical with the immortal Osiris, yet the magician dies. In this dilemma, the facts must be restated. One should preferably say that the magician becomes conscious of that part of himself which he calls the immortal Osiris, and that part does not die. And so that gets back, I think Fabrizio, it was you that was asking about that, that you have identified within yourself. Oh, there is Osiris within me, and I can experience that Osiris within me, and that does not die. That kind of brings me back to the experience I had with looking at the skull and worshiping its presence. It's not the skull I was worshiping, but the thing that I found within the skull that does not die, that cannot die. Now, this interior of the body of the magician, of which we spoke at the beginning of this chapter, does exist and can exert certain powers which his natural body cannot do. It can, for example, pass through matter, and it can move freely in every direction through space. But this is because matter, in the sense which we commonly use the word, is on another plane. Now, this fine body perceives a universe which we do not ordinarily perceive. It does not necessarily perceive the universe which we do normally perceive. So although in this body I can pass through the roof, it does not follow that I shall be able to tell what the weather is like. I might do so or I might not, but if I could not, it would not prove that I was deceiving myself in supposing that I passed through the roof. This body, which is called by various authors the astral double, the body of light, body of fire, body of desire, fine body, synleke, and numberless other names, is naturally fitted to perceive objects of its own class, in particular the phantoms of the astral plane. But there is some vague and indeterminate relationship between astrals and materials, and it is possible with great experience to deduce facts about material things from the astral aspects which they present to the eyes of the body of light. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Stop there because then he just goes way into clairvoyance. But this is the other thing. So, in order to perceive the invisible world, we first must settle into our invisible selves. In order to perceive the invisible world, we can't perceive that through our visible self. We need to perceive that through our invisible self. Let me talk for a second just about, let's take the invisible self out of the context of the occult and metaphysics, and let's talk about the invisible self as the part of you that nobody can see. I've been thinking about this because I actually planned on doing this topic for probably about the last week. And so over the last week, I've been thinking about it, and just as I've been going about my life, I have been thinking, like, what is the invisible self, and what are the things that I'm doing to feed the invisible self? And one of the big things I'm seeing is the invisible self is fully accessed when you're not thinking. So, for instance, when I'm playing guitar, I had experience with this morning. When I'm playing guitar, for the most part, for the first little bit, I am really thoroughly engaging with the visible self. I'm developing a skill. I'm looking at a piece of paper that's got numbers on it to tell me where to put my fingers and how fast to pluck the string, and I'm very much engaging with the physical world. But then the magic happens. And I stop having to look at the paper. I don't even find myself listening to the music anymore. I'm feeling it all. And that's when the music becomes perfect. When my fingers and my ears are doing exactly what they need to do in perfect rhythm. It's flawless in that moment. Because at that moment, I've actually transcended the human state. In that moment, I've gone beyond the visible self. And I am fully in tune with the invisible self. Similarly, walking around, I love taking hikes in the desert, going for a hike in the desert. Very much there's a lot of that's the visible self. I'm working on my body. I'm making sure I've got water there with me. I'm doing things that are actually benefiting my visible self. But then the magic happens. I look around and just see beauty. I can feel my body doing exactly what it needs to do. And I am connected to absolutely everything around me, and even the things that I'm not aware of. I can feel that connection. Again, I have transcended the human state into something that is divine. That's the connection with your invisible self. When you can forget, when you lose all conscious awareness, all logic, all mind, when you find yourself dropping mind, that is when you are most thoroughly engaged with the invisible self. Jump into the chat and catch up on this before I go forward. And Starby says, this reminds me of the five-body concept found in Egyptian mythology. The self is actually composed of 5 different selves that exist in and interact with different planes of existence. Yes, indeed. Voodoo, Vodun also has this, where you have 5 selves. You've got the Tibananga and the Grossbananga. This is what you would call your soul. So the Tibananga is the little soul that exists in your head. Your Grossbananga fills the rest of you. And your Tibananga can be removed. It's your identity, your samsaric consciousness. Whereas your Grossbananga is the Atman, it's the soul, the undying aspect of yourself. So you got those two. And then you have your physical form, which is part of your soul. And then you have your star of destiny, the things that you're supposed to do that only you can do, that's pulling you like a gravity towards it into the future. And then your Met-Tet, the master of your head, which is a Loa that possesses you, that's also an equal part of yourself. But a lot of these systems have this star